welcome.
Hi.
I'm Jimmy, and this is Cheryl.
Your girlfriend?
No. My kid's sister, the whiz kid. Graduated high school at the age of 12 and already has a degree in hotel management.
I remember you showing me that when I was a kid.
Well, you always said you wanted to be married in it.
That was a long time ago. A lot's happened since then. Judy.
Actress Dominique Dunne, star of the current film Poltergeist, died today in a Los Angeles hospital. She had been in a coma since she allegedly was strangled by her former boyfriend Saturday. Dominique Dunne was 22. Authorities charged she was attacked by 26-year-old John Sweeney because he wanted to move back into her house after a recent separation.
In the early 1980s, Dominique Dunne was a rising star in Hollywood. She was young, beautiful, talented, best known for her role in the movie Poltergeist and on the brink of a promising career. But behind the auditions, the movie roles, and the famous last name, Dominique was trapped in a relationship that would ultimately cost her her life. On October 30th, 1982, Dominique would be found strangled to death by her boyfriend on her driveway near her Hollywood home. Her death was so much more than a tragedy. Some believe it was part of a horror movie curse. Some people, like her father, call it the greatest injustice known to man. Overall, some look at her story as a warning against narcissistic abuse. This is the tragic story of Dominique Dunne, an actress whose dreams were cut short by domestic violence. By the way, guys, if you're new to this channel, welcome to the Destructive Stories. We post content every other week. Don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, and once again, welcome to Destructive Stories. Dominique Ellen Dunne was born on November 23, 1959 in Santa Monica, California. She came from a well-known family in the entertainment industry where her father, Dominique Dunne, was a producer, writer, and later a prominent journalist. Her mother, Ellen Griffin Dunne, was a homemaker and supported her children's creative ambitions. Dominique also grew up alongside her two siblings, which included her brother, Griffin Dunne, who would later become a successful actor and director, and of course best known for his role in the movie An American Werewolf in London. She also had her youngest brother, Alexander Dunne. From a young age, Dominique showed a love for performing. Acting wasn't just a hobby, it was her dream. She studied drama, took acting classes, and worked relentlessly to break into Hollywood. She was determined to make a name for herself. Dominique began landing small roles in television during the late 1970s and early 1980s. She appeared in popular TV shows that included Hill Street Blues, Family, Chips, and even Fame. But her biggest breakout role came in 1982 when she was cast as Dana Freeling in Steven Spielberg's produced movie horror classic Poltergeist. The film was a massive success, and Dominique became a recognizable face almost overnight. Hollywood doors were beginning to open. She was even just 22 years old, and her future was looking incredibly bright. In 1981, Dominique became romantically involved with John Thomas Sweeney, a sous chef she met at a party in Los Angeles. At first, the relationship seemed intense and passionate, but it didn't take long for the troubling behavior to emerge. Within a couple of weeks of dating, they both moved in together at a one-bedroom house. Sweeney became controlling, possessive, and violent. The couple would fight often, usually about Sweeney accusing Dunne of having affairs with other actors, including Sam Elliott, who she was co-starring with on a TV show. Friends and family noticed changes in Dominique. She became anxious, fearful, and withdrawn. Despite multiple breakups, Sweeney repeatedly pressured her to return to the relationship even though he would physically abuse her. On one account, Sweeney apparently yanked out handfuls of her hair during an argument on August of 1982. She would leave their home and stay at her mother's house when Sweeney would arrive demanding to be let in. Dominique's mother would tell him leave or she would call the police, as he would pound and bang on the doors and windows demanding Dominique to come outside. Even though members of her family saw Sweeney's ugly rage, Dominique would return to the house and continue the relationship. However, a month later, the abuse would continue to get worse as one night Sweeney would grab Dunne by the throat and begin to strangle her. Luckily, a friend was staying with the couple and was inside the home and reported hearing loud gagging sounds when she came into the room and broke up the fight. She claimed that Dunne, looking scared out of her mind, said, "He tried to kill me." John, of course denying the claim, said that they were just wrestling and told Dominique to come back to bed. The friend was going to call the police, but Dunne told her to leave and that she was going to sneak out of the house. She pretended to go back to bed with John when Dominique grabbed her car keys, went into the master bathroom, and snuck out through the back window. Sweeney, awakened by the commotion, heard Dominique start her car, and he hopped off the bed and was able to run towards the vehicle and jump on the hood. Dunne apparently drove a block down the street and was able to get Sweeney off the car as she sped off. She ended up staying at a friend's house and called Sweeney and ended the relationship. A few weeks later, Sweeney would move out of the house and Dominique would move back in and have the locks changed. Dominique would continue to work on her acting career and landed a role in the television series V, which would be the last role she would ever accept. On October 30th, 1982, Dominique was rehearsing lines for her upcoming role at her home with actor David Packer. While they were there, Dunne called a female friend of hers and was interrupted by an operator who said that she had an incoming call. She told her friend, "Oh God, it's Sweeney. Let me get him off the phone." After the call, Dunne and Packard heard a knock at the door, and sure enough, it was John Thomas Sweeney telling Dunne he just wanted to talk. She agreed to speak to him on the front porch while Packer remained inside. Both Dominique and John began to argue on the front porch, and Packer would later testify that he heard the two aggressively raising their voices at each other and then heard smacking sounds, 2 screams, and a thud. He tried to call the police but said that he was told that Dunne's home was out of their jurisdiction. Packer would later phone a friend and tell them that if they find the body of Dominique Dunne, to tell everyone that John Thomas Sweeney was the killer. David exited the house through the back door and went to the driveway and saw Sweeney standing over the lifeless body of Dominique. Sweeney screamed at Packer to call 911 that Dunne needed an ambulance. David fled the scene and dialed 911, and this time multiple police cars were called to the scene. When police arrived, John approached the vehicle with his hands in the air and said, "I killed my girlfriend, and I tried to kill myself." The cops placed him in custody and sent him over to the station. Paramedics arrived on the scene and saw that Dominique still had a very faint pulse and rushed her to the hospital and Cedar Sienna Medical Center. Doctors placed her on life support since her heart stopped on the way to the hospital, and for almost a week, doctors went through multiple brain scans while she was in a coma. They sadly came to the conclusion that she was brain dead and had no brain activity due to oxygen deprivation. Doctors had to break the news to Dunne's parents that she probably was not going to regain consciousness. On November 3rd, 1982, all of Dominique's family and friends gathered at the hospital to say their last goodbyes, and her parents signed off of having her removed from life support. Dominique Ellen Dunne would be pronounced dead on November 4th, 1982. When John Thomas Sweeney was taken by officers, he told deputies at the station that he didn't remember arguing with Dunne. All he remembered was having his hands over her throat. He initially was charged for attempted murder, but those charges were dropped when Dominique was pronounced dead. He later was charged with first-degree murder, in which he pled not guilty. The trial was set to begin in August of 1983. During the trial hearing, multiple witnesses would testify against Sweeney about his abusive episodes with Dunne, including the episode of strangling Dunne with her friend at the house. Sweeney would deny assaulting Dunne and claim that he was just trying to prevent her from leaving the house. But once the trial began and the jury was selected, the trial would be overseen by Judge Burton S. Katz. Sweeney would take the stand in his own defense, describing the relationship he had with Dunne. He claimed that he didn't plan to kill Dunne the night of the murder and gave an inconsistent testimony where he described that him and Dunne actually reconciled, were planning on getting back together, potentially even getting married and having children of their own. Others testify that this claim was false and Dominique was trying to avoid Sweeney and letting him know that the breakup was permanent. However, Sweeney said the night of the murder that when he talked to Dunne, she claimed that she changed her mind and felt like she led him on. He said that when he attacked her, it was just in the moment in which his defense was trying to plead for him, saying that his actions were not premeditated, and claimed this murder occurred for, quote, the heat of passion. What made his testimony inconsistent was he initially told deputies at the interrogation that he did recall choking Dunne, realized that she was no longer conscious, and tried to revive her by giving her CPR. He claims that she vomited, which caused him to vomit as well, where after she vomited, he ran into the house and consumed 2 bottles of pills in an attempt to kill himself. He lied right next to her and realized that the pills weren't working, so then he said he grabbed her, pulled her tongue out of her throat to see if that could potentially revive her. Officers and doctors would dispute this claim, saying that they found no pills in Sweeney's system, nor were there any signs of Dominique regaining consciousness and vomiting. The first officer, Frank D'Amelio, testified that when he arrived on the scene, he placed Sweeney in cuffs. He said that John's behavior was strange. He appeared calm and cooperative, but seemed to show no remorse of his actions and more concerned about his punishment. He told Officer D'Amelio, "Man, I blew it. I killed her. I didn't think I was choking her that hard, but I just lost my temper, and man, I blew it." Autopsy reports showed that Sweeney could have been choking Dunne for anywhere up to 3 to 5 minutes. To create a narrative against the heat of passion plea, prosecution contacted John Sweeney's ex-girlfriend Lillian Pierce to testify about John's abusive behavior. Lillian was never able to testify in the presence of the jury, however, at the request of John's defense, which was granted by Judge Katz. During Pierce's testimony, she described that she had an on-and-off relationship with John, claimed that John assaulted her on 10 different circumstances, which caused her to be hospitalized twice. Even on one occasion, Pierce described John busted one of her eardrums, punched her hard in the stomach, causing her to have a collapsed lung, and even with confirmed medical records, suffered a broken nose from his abusive behavior. During her testimony, according to witnesses, Sweeney out of nowhere lost his temper and went on a rage as he jumped from his chair and ran towards one of the exit doors. 2 bailiffs and 3 armed guards had to subdue him. They then returned him to his attorney and handcuffed him to a chair, and witnesses stated he began to sob like a child. Sweeney later apologized for his outburst, and it was accepted by Judge Katz. Once testimony was done, John's defense battled with the prosecution on allowing Pierce's testimony to be given in front of a jury. John's defense requested that Pierce's testimony was not to be given to the jury since the testimony was, quote, prejudicial. Judge Katz also granted this request. Not only did the jury get left out of Lillian Pierce's testimony, but Judge Katz also did not allow Dominique's mother or other additional friends of Dominique to testify against Sweeney. Towards the end of the trial, even John's main defense attorney, Michael Adelson, asked Judge Katz to rule out first-degree murder since there was no evidence of John's murder being premeditated on the night of October 30th. Judge Katz again granted the request and told the jury that they were only allowed to sentence second-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter. On September 21st, 1983, John Sweeney was acquitted of second-degree murder and was charged with voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, and an additional 6 months he received for the assault charges. The sentencing outraged the Dunne family, mostly directing their anger towards Judge Katz. Once the verdict was complete, Judge Katz thanked the jury on behalf of himself and the families and stated that justice was served. Dominique Dunne, raising his voice in the court, shouted, "Not for our family, Judge Katz. This monster strangled my daughter for 5 minutes." The conclusion of the case shocked the whole nation of the sentencing of John Thomas Sweeney. Many fans and supporters protested and harshly criticized Judge Katz's management of the case. Deputy District Attorney Stephen Barship said that Katz's rulings of withholding evidence, especially Sweeney's ex-girlfriend's testimony, were the determining factor of Sweeney spending the rest of his life behind bars. Judge Katz, responding to the harsh criticism, is nothing more than narcissistic. After the sentencing was done of the trial, Judge Katz heavily criticized the jury's verdict of manslaughter, saying that Dominique's case was nothing more than murder with malice, and they did a huge injustice for Dominique. Members of the jury were taken aback by his comment, and one of the jury's spokesperson called his remark a cheap shot. Former members of the jury described that the case was going in different directions and said that the defense and Katz portrayed Sweeney as a victim, saying that he was just a traumatized young adult who came from an abusive home and of an alcoholic father, even having his mother testify on his behalf. Former jurors stated that had they heard the testimony of Lillian Pierce, they would have convicted him of first-degree murder. The trial within itself did, however, change Judge Katz's career, as he would later receive a lot of threatening letters, protesters at his criminal trials, and even the Dunne family blaming him for the outcome. He eventually published a book in 1997 titled Justice Overruled, defending himself on the decisions of the Dunne trial and mostly calling out the justice system for certain rulings. His practice, last I checked, was suspended in 2016 due to misconduct of other cases brought against him, which did include unprofessional conduct during trials, potential bias in decision-making, and inappropriate comments made in court. John Thomas Sweeney was taken to a medium-security prison in Susanville, California, where he would only serve 3.5-year term out of his 6-year sentence. When he was released in 1986, he immediately found a high-paying job as head chef at the Chronicle, a fancy restaurant in Santa Monica, California. Dominique's mother and brother Griffin found out where Sweeney was working and stood in front of the restaurant handing out flyers to patrons that read, "The food you will eat tonight was cooked by the hands that killed Dominique Dunne." The Chronicle management, unaware of Sweeney's history, ended up firing Sweeney a few months later. And according to the Dunne family and some of Dominique's friends, they said that they would end up having Sweeney fired at a total of 7 restaurants. Sweeney, of course, would eventually move out of California, and the Dunne family did not know of his whereabouts. Until the mid-1990s, Dominique Dunne was contacted by a medical doctor in Florida saying that he read an article Dominique wrote and was made aware of the trial. He stated that he had a daughter who was engaged to a man named John Sweeney and believed it was the same man, and sure enough, it was. Griffin Dunne contacted the daughter and had the engagement called off, as they even confirmed John had the same abusive behavior and fiery temper. Sweeney would accuse the Dunnes of harassing him and once again moved out of Florida, where he would eventually change his name to John Mora, living in the Pacific Northwest. The way they were able to find out this information was Dominique hired private investigators to follow his whereabouts. Eventually, in the early 2000s, after Ellen Dunne would eventually pass away in 1997, Dominique said in an interview that he decided not to chase John Sweeney any longer, as he came to the acceptance that it was not going to bring his daughter Dominique back. He quoted, "The murder of my daughter changed everything." Dominique Dunne would eventually become an icon as an advocate for the justice system, as he would participate in key murder trials, which would include the O.J. Simpson case and the Menendez brothers. He eventually passed away in August of 2009. Her brother Griffin Dunne continued to stay in the film industry and continued to follow the footsteps of his father. He continues to live on his family's name and become an advocate against domestic violence. John Thomas Sweeney is still alive and continues to live as the scumbag he really is today. TMZ did a special on the case and found out that he was head chef at a retirement home in Northern California. They were also able to find out that he has a small YouTube channel doing cooking tutorials. What makes this case or story even more remarkable, however, is they were also able to get in contact with an anonymous woman who was too scared to appear on camera. She claimed that she was an ex-wife of John and ended up having a child with him. She, of course, divorced and filed a restraining order on him, but told TMZ that on 2 accounts, John would go into drunken rages and at one point dragged her across a hotel hallway by her ponytail and would shove her head into a bathtub. She even described that on one account, John even tried to strangle her as well and nearly broke her collarbone. Of course, Sweeney was never charged. Interestingly enough, they were able to also find out where he was living at, but to no surprise, the coward refused to do an interview. Dominique's death is known to be one of the most heartbreaking and eerie deaths in Hollywood history, not just because it teaches us a lesson of being stuck in narcissistic abusive relationships, but even some people theorize her death may come from a conspiracy. Dominique getting her first big role in the movie Poltergeist, some believe was the result of a curse the movie franchise had over the 1980s decade. Strange, apparently even real paranormal activity would occur on set for the first movie and even the sequels. But what makes people believe this theory is due to the multiple unexplained deaths that would occur to the cast of Poltergeist, which tragically included Heather O'Rourke, who played Dominique's on-screen sister, Carol Ann. She was misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease in 1987 and would die of cardiac arrest in 1988. Dominique had dreams, talent, and a future that should have been protected. Her story reminds us that domestic violence is never just a private matter, and ignoring warning signs can have irreversible consequences. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, know that help is always available, and it's never too late. Her voice was silenced, but her story continues to live on. This is why it's on Destructive Stories.